When I started thinking about this session, I considered to rescue from my files several examples of failures, of dead ends, of ideas that couldn't be pushed forward. But this is for seniors, and I am a junior, as I just defended my thesis some months ago. The alternative topic was to invite you to find some time during your several times in your career. Maybe when you are starting is not a good exercise, but once you get some perspective, I think it could be good to take some time, some minutes, maybe hours, not a long time because it's dangerous, to try to go out of the box and try to identify which are some assumptions that you do in your regular work. We all work inside a framework. We like to have these frameworks, some recipes to be followed, and we don't question about basic aspects of our research, our way to deal with music, with analysis, with synthesis, etc. So I will propose, or I will mention, because I cannot follow, I will not argue, I will not give you strong argumentations to convince you that this idea should be challenged or even considered, is my view, and you can say, well, bullshit, and probably you could be right. It's just 10 minutes of bullshit, so you will forgive me. Let's start. Listen to the first example. A simple rhythm pattern. A kind of note, maybe you can identify an interval, an octave. The starting pattern. So we started with a simple binary pattern. We accelerated that, and we came up with octaves. And then we decelerate, and we have again. So, next example, major triad. This is tonality. The other example started with rhythm, then showed some tonal information. Now another example, we heard some example of a tonal structure and complex rhythm. Okay. Again, we start with the complex rhythm. 4 against 5 against 6. Right. A third example with some images, if you like to see something when you're listening. 3 against 2, then the interval will be 50. Okay. For me, this type of examples that I discovered not a long time ago, maybe some of you were knew about that, and if I have read Stockhausen, I should have known earlier than. But for me, these kind of demonstrations were very shocking, and suddenly I realized that there is an inherent unity in what we tend to split into musical facets, into dimensions, into different areas of research. And this is, recovering this unity of music could be an interesting idea. How, I try to summarize this insight into these two sentences with some second type of joke or meaning. Music is a matter of time. If we are dealing with music, we should think more often that we are dealing with time. And whatever is happening is something that happens in time, and because of that, time is the matter of music. So, the first what if that I offer you to think about and discuss if you want elsewhere. What happens if we approach music as a flow, as a whole, as something that is a continuous movement along time, instead of dealing with separate facets, dimensions, whatever? Can we do that as scientists, as researchers? Is it possible to work with music into a more, I don't like the word, but a holistic way? Well, our brains are basically time-coding devices. I like to go to the brain in order to get examples of how nature has solved certain problems. And what I see is that most of is happening in the brain is kind of temporal coding, rate coding. Of course, there is a lot of spatial information too. And our perception, our auditory perception requires from these spatial tricks to do some kind of analysis, if we are allowed to say that. So our brains are time-coding devices, and music is a matter of time. How far could we go just focusing on time when we analyze, when we create new music, when we approach music from the different perspectives that you are approaching music? How far can we go? You know many other, you know that there are techniques for doing that. And this pushed me towards the second what if of the afternoon, probably the one that has the highest bullshit ratio of the three. But is it possible to deal with music without going towards spectral representations? A spectrum is a kind of distortion of the reality of the that transform. Of course, is a very powerful technique, and I'm not saying forget about that. But think about that. Just think about that. Is it possible to deal with music analysis, music creation, without the spectral related decompositions, and work just or directly or as the most directly as possible on the waveform, on the temporal changing? Well, you know there are techniques, all the new techniques for doing that, in order to keep the continuity that time has in our universe. So my final what if has to do with, I think that I am going upwards, and the third concept that sometimes seems annoying to me is the representation. We deal with digital representations, we deal with abstract representations. Representing is something that is very unnatural, very artificial. And I was wondering, okay, is it possible to do some scientific research, some engineering, forgetting about representing something and dealing more directly with the material of our research, which is music waveforms, this temporal changing pressure in our surroundings? Well, we have forgotten maybe that digital computers almost override what could be done with analog devices. There are analog computers developed during the 50s and 60s, and some of them even were in use during the 70s. And this has a kind of legacy that maybe could be recovered and transformed and changed, and maybe hybridizing with digital techniques also, which represent something. But for me, it's an interesting and forgotten knowledge that would be interesting to reevaluate. One reputed historian of technology, George Dyson, recently wrote, "The next revolution in computing will be signaled by the rise of analog systems." Wow. He knows about technology. You can find a lot of papers where he traces all the developments in computer technologies since the early times. So he knows what he's speaking about. I don't want to be so integrist, but I think that they deserve some attention. I wouldn't say that the future is analog, but one possible future could be analog. And there are many futures possible, but one is this, and I invite some of you, maybe in the future years, you discover that there is a way to have fun with that. Just let me know. And that's all. Thank you for your attention.